After so long, the Illuminate are finally here, and now we can ask the most important question of, okay, we got the Illuminate, what's next? It's no secret that players are content vampires, and people have been no life in the game since the Illuminate have come out, and they're sick and tired of fighting against them, so let's go into a deep dive of what comes next for Helldivers 2. Now that we've seen all the enemies, what more could they possibly do? I'm Charlie St. Waffles, and I do Helldivers content. I also do photography, Catholicism. I dabble in a little bit of everything. If you've enjoyed my videos, consider liking and subscribing. Now, on to the main content. In the short term, we know that there are more Illuminate to come, right? They've been hinting at it. Everyone knows there's more Illuminate units from Helldivers 1 that have not been introduced. So within the next week, maybe month, we'll probably see that black portal open up, and we'll finally see the rest of the units come in a full invasion force. And that'll give us maybe 1 or 2 more months of, hey, new enemies, let's take them down, let's learn some new things, let's make tier lists, all that sort of thing. But we'll be back at the start of asking, okay, but what comes next? All the units from Helldivers 1 are basically in the game now, except for maybe 2 or 3 from each faction, if that. So they still have a couple things like the Hive Lord to introduce and the Shadows to introduce. There are a few enemies that they can still bring us, but for the most part, the major factions are present now. So how do they expand the game? The most obvious choice would probably be Helldivers 3, right? They've talked about when the game first came out that the engine is actually an abandoned engine that's very buggy to work with, and that there's very few experts who actually handle the game and the engine and can code in it, and it takes a lot of time to bring someone up to speed from outside to be able to learn this dead engine and how to use it. However, I think most of us can agree we don't want Helldivers to become like Call of Duty where there's a new one coming out every single year, right? We don't want it to be a yearly release game. We want to be the game that they have given us so far, which is a passionate project that they have constantly updated and incorporated the community into. And I feel like with the Illuminate just coming in, it's too early to say, okay, now we're ready to jump into something else, right? We got to expand this story and let it grow and breathe a little bit. So if making a brand new game is off the table, at least for now, I would like to see a Helldivers 3 at some point in the future, definitely, especially again, if they can increase the graphics and make the engine a different engine. I would love to see that, but if we know they're not going to do that, so what does the future of the franchise actually look like? Well, there's room for brand new content, things that weren't in the first game and expanding upon. There's room on the galactic table for at least one other faction, if not more. They could bring back the cyborgs, but they're really close to the automaton, so I don't feel like that's different enough for them to actually give us a whole different faction based on them. People have talked a lot about the Chaos Divers, and they even gave us some nods to Chaos Diving, so I could definitely see a 4th faction of Chaos Divers. They already have a ton of the assets for the Eagles and our stratagems, and of course the models for the Helldivers. They could definitely be an interesting group to play against. I think they could be much more glass cannon-y than everything we've dealt with, where it's a one-shot on both sides, because they have super powerful weapons but are fragile like us. I think that could definitely be a different enough playstyle that it could be distinct from the other factions and feel interesting. But I also understand the reservations about fighting other Helldivers and getting too deep into the weeds with the Chaos Diving. We also know that as far as content that needs to come out, that they are at some point have at least talked to us about giving us more weapon customization, and I feel like that is a must. With Warbonds coming out even at once every 2-month pacing, not including the collabs that they're trying to get, which means even more weapons and armor, we're going to need something that differentiates all these weapons and armors. Like, there's so many different shotguns and ARs now, and some of them feel different, and some people like this one or that one, but they can't just keep adding them, right? At some point, we're going to say, okay, there's 200 guns in the game, you can't possibly make them all feel different, and that's where things like customization could come in, and rather than selling all new weapons, they could sell scopes and warbonds, or alternative firing modes, or different springs for a much more like Call of Duty gunsmithing feel, where you can customize the weapons you do like to be what you want them to be. Side note, that was my most embarrassing death I've ever had in the game right there, so I'm glad you got to see that. And there's other customization. We've talked about different helmets having like thermal vision, or the ability to see behind you, or the ability to be a heavy gunner and leading targets that are moving like flyers. So there's a lot of customization content we can get, but I really want to focus on what's next for the franchise as far as like enemies and where the story is going, because no matter how much weapons they give us, people are going to complain eventually that it's going to get stale if you're fighting the same enemies over and over and over again, and even introducing 1 or 2 enemies doesn't shake things up a whole lot. when we fought the Impalers for the first time, people were like, oh no, what do you do? And then after, what, 2-3 dives, you're like, okay, we don't need to bring anything special for Impalers, we just take them down like chargers. It really didn't change the flow of battle. So unless you're introducing huge enemies like Bile Titans that change the flow of battle and don't work against regular weapons and force you to bring other weapons, I just don't see adding a 1 or 2 enemies here or there being sustainable for the future of the franchise. The other option for the future would be new game modes. We know that Space Marine 2 was really hyped up to have the Horde gameplay mode, which is still like 6 months away and people are losing their patience waiting for it, but that's a whole different video. And I don't think we're going to see anything like seasons or ladders that keep like ARPGs going, because they've said they don't want to end the war or do like they did in the first one where you win or lose and then it starts over. So we don't have that option. So really we could add a horde mode, like an endless fighting mode, or we could bring in some solo missions or duo missions or things of that nature to really shake it up. And I do feel like people would enjoy that. But the ultimate problem with that is the more game modes, the more difficulties they have, the more split the player base gets. Now that's not an issue right now, especially since we've had our peak of 200,000 divers coming back again, but if that starts to dwindle, people will always start crying dead game, I can't find a match immediately, it takes 1 to 2 minutes to find a match, it's dying, and that is always a concern. I would love to see new game modes, but again, I don't think that's the future of the franchise right now. Side note to that, I'm going to talk about a leak for a second, so plug your ears if you don't want leaks. There was a data mined mission that was supposed to be an all dark planet where you have to bring in flares. So I think they are experimenting with more environmental things. And I do think they're experimenting with different mission types, and that's what that looks like. But I still think that's pretty far away. So what faction would I introduce if I had a choice? Well, we've talked about Warhammer 40k being really close to Helldivers in a lot of way. And we've met a lot of the tropes. We've got the space soldiers. We've got the psychic, shielded, long-range telekinetic race. We've got the all-robot techie race. And then we've got the non-stop hungering horde, the Terminids, the bugs. So I think we're missing the Orcs. I would love to see them add a faction that has the ability of Orcs where like just spores randomly jump on planets, so rather than constantly fighting them, they just randomly invade planets or disrupt our missions. And I would love a mechanic where when you take them down, they burst into spores or they get back up if you don't either burn them down with fire or acid or do something to take out a key player who regenerates them. This never-ending horde that you must destroy with very certain weapons. And if you had different groups that need certain weapons to take them down, you'd have a lot more tactical thought. And the idea of them not always being available would keep them fresh that, oh, they're invading, let's go jump on that planet and, save that planet. Then they go away and come back rather than a constant in the war. I think something like that could really freshen up the game. I definitely would love to see that as a faction. Back to game modes really quick. I would also love to see a boss fight. People have talked about the Hive Lord, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Having big, long, super boss fights where the entire mission is taking down a huge health bar that you need 20 reinforcements to take down could also be a wonderful way to give us some new game modes and something a little bit different for people who want maybe a bigger challenge or just a different way to play the game. Helldivers definitely has a bright future ahead of it. It has done unexpectedly well. The devs have said that multiple times. They have overcome some adversity and overcome some challenges and made some mistakes along the way. And honestly, I feel like their biggest mistake could be upcoming because, as I said, people are content vampires and they're already sick of the Illuminate. Yes, we're going to have the second wave and we're going to get some new units, but after a couple weeks, a couple months, people are going to say, okay, we want something new, something different, freshen up the game. And if they don't have something cooking already, if they're not already working on the next big thing, then we're going to see that dip in players, which I don't think they're scared of, but I know that it causes a lot of panic in the community. And again, people start making those videos of, oh, the game's dying, we're losing 50% of our player base overnight. And it does happen where if people don't constantly have new content, they're going to leave. So they need to have something up their sleeves. I do think they have a few things up their sleeve. As we talked about, the next Illuminate group is still coming. We've still got some war bonds coming, and those collabs could open up a whole lot of things. Fighting some enemies from Deep Rock Galactic or from the Warhammer universe could also be a great way to freshen up the game. But I do fear of it becoming way too much like Fortnite if we have to start fighting the Orcs and the Terminids and whatever the Deep Rock Galactic guys fight. I don't remember. Bugs, basically the same bugs, right? So, As we wrap up this video, tell me in the comments down below what new faction you would like to see, or what new content you think would give the game a little bit more life and really push the story and the game forward, or are you just ready for Helldivers 3 to come out? And as always, have a blessed day.